There are nights in the entertainment world when the lights feel too bright, the silence too heavy, and the truth too dangerous to whisper. Tonight is one of those nights. A chilling stillness has settled over Bravo Nation, the kind that arrives only when something catastrophic has happened, something so dark, so violent, so unexpectedly real that even the cameras weren't ready to capture it. Because what happened to Wendy Osefo inside the Bravo studio wasn't petty drama. It wasn't shade. It wasn't a storyline crafted in a writer's room. It was fear. It was blood. It was the moment reality television crossed a line it can never uncross. Sources confirm Wendy was rushed to the hospital with severe head injuries, slipping in and out of consciousness as paramedics fought to stabilize her. And in the center of this spiraling chaos, one name keeps echoing through the corridors of panic and speculation. Gizelle Bryant. What fans thought was tension has now twisted into something deeper, an alleged attack that no one saw coming, except those who may have allowed it to happen. Because the real question isn't what happened, it's who made sure it could happen. And the truth behind that answer is about to shake everything. The chaos inside Bravo didn't begin with screams. It began with a feeling, an uneasy tension that clung to the studio walls long before anyone realized something was about to go terribly wrong. Crew members later said they couldn't explain it. The lights felt colder. The air felt heavier. Even the cameras, usually humming with mechanical confidence, seemed to hesitate like they, too, sensed the storm that was about to tear through the room. Wendy Osefo arrived earlier than usual. She moved quietly, almost cautiously, clutching her notes the way someone holds onto certainty in a world that refuses to stay predictable. She smiled at the stylists, greeted the producers, adjusted her microphone. On the surface, everything about her presence was calm. But beneath that calm, people swear they noticed a shadow, something tired, something worried, something she wasn't ready to say out loud. In another corner of the studio, Gizelle Bryant walked in late. Not the glamorous, fashionably late she normally wore like a crown. This was different. Her steps were heavy, her jaw locked in place, her eyes unfocused like someone lost inside their own spiraling thoughts. A makeup artist later claimed she heard Gizelle mutter the same sentence twice under her breath. "They think I won't do it." No one knew what it meant. No one asked. And maybe that silence is where all of this truly began. As the crew scrambled to set up the segment, small signs started appearing, signs no one noticed until it was far too late. Gizelle gripped her ceramic mug so tightly her knuckles trembled. She stared at Wendy with an intensity that didn't match the casual script they were supposed to follow. Cameras caught her pacing, exhaling sharply, cracking her neck, tapping her fingers on the table in an uneven rhythm that made one producer whisper, "She's on edge tonight." But no one intervened. No one paused the taping. No one questioned the tension simmering between them. When the director finally yelled "rolling," the room exhaled. Everyone expected the usual confrontations, the carefully controlled drama Bravo was known for. Instead, the silence that followed felt unnatural. Heavy. Waiting. Wendy began speaking first, her voice steady despite the unease lingering in the air. She didn't raise her tone. She didn't provoke. She barely finished the first sentence before Gizelle leaned forward, eyes locked onto her with a coldness that made the camera operator involuntarily freeze. "Don't pretend," Gizelle hissed. It wasn't in the script. It wasn't part of the plan. And in that split second, something inside the room shifted. A line crossed, a boundary shattered, a moment that would replay in slow motion across millions of screens. "What do you mean?" Wendy asked, genuinely confused. Gizelle stood up slowly, deliberately, like someone rising to face a decision they had rehearsed 100 times in the dark. The studio felt suddenly too small, too quiet, too fragile for what was happening. A producer mouthed the words, "Cut it," but no one moved fast enough. "You ruined me," Gizelle said, voice trembling between rage and heartbreak. Before anyone could react, before understanding could catch up with movement, the ceramic mug in Gizelle's hand lifted into the air. There was a single breath of stillness, a heartbeat suspended in time, and then, impact! A crack so sharp it echoed off the studio walls. Wendy collapsed back, her chair tipping violently as she hit the floor. Blood began pooling around her temple, thin at first, then spreading in a halo that made the room erupt into chaos. The sound that followed wasn't scripted. It wasn't entertainment. It was pure horror, screams, orders, footsteps pounding against the floor, someone sobbing uncontrollably. Wendy wasn't moving. Her eyes were half shut. One of the MIC techs dropped to his knees, shaking her shoulder, begging her to stay awake. Somewhere in the chaos, Gizelle just stood there, frozen, breathing heavily, staring at the blood on her hands as if she couldn't decide whether to panic or feel strangely satisfied. Security rushed in far too late, grabbing her, pulling her backward as she shouted, "She deserved it. She always thought she was better." Paramedics were called. Producers scrambled to hide footage. Assistants cried into walkie-talkies. Nothing about this moment looked like a show anymore. And as Wendy was lifted onto a stretcher, unconscious, pale, barely breathing, a single thought reverberated through the studio. This wasn't a storyline. This wasn't an accident. Something far darker had been boiling beneath the surface, and tonight, it finally exploded. Wendy's ambulance hadn't even cleared the studio gates before the world outside began to fracture. Bravo executives flooded private group chats, trying to decide whether to call the incident a minor accident or unfortunate on-set misunderstanding. They didn't know yet that half the crew had already texted friends, and friends were already whispering online. And whispers, when mixed with panic, turn into wildfire. Inside the studio, the floor was still stained. A toppled chair, a cracked mug, a splatter of blood that no one dared to clean yet. Some crew members stood frozen, hands shaking, hearts pounding in their chests. Others were packing equipment in silence, avoiding each other's eyes. It felt like the aftermath of something forbidden, something everyone had watched happen but no one could admit they saw. One of the interns, barely 20, stood in a corner crying. She kept repeating the same line, "We should have stopped it, we should have stopped it." But no one had the courage to agree out loud. Fear makes people hide. And tonight, everyone was hiding from something, some from guilt, some from responsibility, and some from the truth they didn't want tangled around their career. Back at the hospital, Wendy was rushed into emergency care. Doctors moved quickly, voices firm, hands steady, but their eyes uneasy. A head injury this severe wasn't common, not in a setting that claimed to be controlled and safe. Wendy Osefo arrived moments later, breathless, eyes red, confusion turning into dread. The second he saw the blood on Wendy's hairline, he knew this was no simple fall. Something horrible had happened, something deliberate. He demanded answers. Nurses only shook their heads gently and told him to wait for the doctor. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression carried the weight of bad news. Wendy's skull had suffered blunt force trauma. She had swelling, a possible concussion, and a terrifying window of uncertainty. She was unconscious, but alive, barely. Back at Bravo HQ, executives argued behind closed doors. Some wanted to push a narrative that Wendy slipped, others wanted to blame a misplaced prop, and a few whispered the truth. If this goes public, we're done. But before they could finish debating which lie sounded most believable, something unexpected happened. A clip leaked. Not the full attack, not the blood, not the screams, just 30 silent seconds of Gizelle pacing outside Wendy's dressing room with the mug clutched in her hand. Her expression wasn't angry. It was hollow, like someone who'd snapped long before the cameras rolled. The clip hit Twitter like a bomb. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. #Justice for Wendy. #Arrest Gizelle. #Bravo Blood Money. People demanded answers. Bloggers began piecing timelines together. TikTok detectives slowed the video frame by frame. Fans pulled old clips where Gizelle and Wendy argued, claiming those were warning signs. The internet turned into a courtroom, and Gizelle had no defense. Meanwhile, police arrived at the studio to begin their investigation. Officers took photos, collected the mug pieces, and interviewed anyone who wasn't too traumatized to speak. When they pulled up the raw camera feeds, producers tried to intervene, insisting the footage was confidential material. The officers ignored them. They had a victim in the hospital and a suspect in custody. One officer, after watching the raw angle, whispered, "This wasn't heat of the moment. This looks personal." As Gizelle sat in a holding room miles away, she remained disturbingly calm. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She just stared at the table, tapping her nail in slow, steady beats. When a detective asked her why she did it, she lifted her eyes for the first time and said, with a flat, emotionless voice, "She took everything from me. I just took something back." There was no sign of remorse. No shock. No fear of consequences. Only a bitter certainty that she had justified her actions in her own mind. But the most chilling part wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't. She didn't mention that someone might have encouraged her. She didn't mention the producer's whispers. She didn't mention the pressure building for months. And the silence behind those missing pieces felt far more dangerous than the attack itself. By the next morning, the story had outgrown the studio, the hospital, and even Bravo itself. News outlets camped outside the building, reporters clutching microphones like weapons as they waited for any slip of information. Fans gathered with posters demanding justice, some crying, some furious, all united by the same horrifying footage circulating online. For the first time in Bravo's history, their drama wasn't trending because it was entertaining, it was trending because it was terrifying. Inside the hospital, Wendy drifted in and out of a fog so thick she couldn't tell dreams from reality. Nurses said she whispered fragments of sentences, things like "don't let her in," and "why didn't anyone stop her?" Each word made Eddie's stomach twist tighter. He kept replaying her voice notes from the morning of the taping, trying to find anything that could have warned him. Instead, he heard her soft laugh, her calm tone, her certainty that she'd be home by dinner. The contrast was unbearable. Meanwhile, police broadened their investigation after discovering inconsistencies in staff testimonies. Several crew members admitted they had noticed Gizelle acting strangely in the days leading up to the taping. One assistant claimed she overheard a producer telling another, "Let it play out. If she snaps, it'll be gold for mid-season." No one remembered who said it, or maybe no one wanted to. At Bravo headquarters, executives were drowning in crisis. Their PR team drafted half a dozen statements, each weaker than the last. The legal department warned them not to use the word attack. The marketing team begged them not to say anything at all. But silence was gasoline on an already blazing fire. Every hour they stayed quiet, theories multiplied. Some claimed Gizelle had a breakdown. Others insisted she had been manipulated. A few even suggested the network itself orchestrated the tension for ratings. But the most damning blow came when a former staffer anonymously leaked pages from internal risk reports. The documents painted a chilling picture: warnings about escalating tension, notes about cast volatility, references to intentional psychological stresses, and one line that sent shockwaves across social media. Monitor Gizelle closely. High emotional instability. Avoid provoking around Wendy. If Bravo knew Gizelle was a risk, why didn't they intervene? Why let them film together? Why push for confrontations? The questions echoed through every corner of the internet, each one tightening the noose around the network's reputation. As the public roared louder, detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building's hallways. They found something unsettling. 10 minutes before the attack, a senior producer approached Gizelle. Their conversation had no audio, but the body language said everything. The producer leaned in, whispered in her ear, and walked away quickly. Gizelle stood frozen, gripping the mug tightly, her jaw clenching before she marched toward the set. Investigators paused the footage and replayed it. Something about that whisper seemed like a trigger. A spark. A final push. At the station, Gizelle finally met with her assigned attorney. When asked if she felt pressured or manipulated, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a defensive one. A cold, empty laugh that lingered in the air. "Everyone wants a villain," she said. "They got one." But behind that chilling calmness, detectives sensed something else. Someone who wasn't telling the full truth. Someone who had more answers than she was willing to give. Someone who wasn't acting alone. Back at the hospital, Wendy's condition stabilized, but she remained unconscious. Doctors said she needed time, rest, and luck. Eddie sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "You're safe now," he said, even though he didn't believe it himself. Because outside that room, the truth was unraveling faster than anyone could contain it. There were too many lies, too many secrets, too many signs that what happened wasn't simply a moment of rage. And the most frightening part, every new piece of evidence pointed toward one conclusion. This wasn't the climax. This was only the beginning of something much darker. If you've followed this story this far, then you already know this isn't just another Bravo scandal. This is bigger, darker, more dangerous than anything reality TV has ever dared to reveal. Wendy is still fighting for stability. Gizelle is still sitting in a cold room, refusing to explain the full truth. And Bravo, well, they are scrambling behind the scenes, hoping the world will believe whatever polished statement they throw out next. But the truth doesn't disappear just because a network wants it buried. It survives. It leaks. It finds its way into the light, piece by piece, whisper by whisper, clip by clip. And that's where you come in. This story isn't over. Not even close. There are still files missing, footage hidden, producers unaccounted for, staff members too scared to talk. and a timeline that refuses to make sense unless someone forces it into the open. So ask yourself, who benefits from the silence? Who profits from chaos? And who is hoping the world will move on before the real truth surfaces? Your voice matters here. Your questions matter. Your eyes on this story matter. So tell me, do you believe Gizelle acted alone? Do you think Bravo played a role in pushing this to the edge? Or is there a third player, a shadow behind the curtain, controlling this entire disaster? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Every theory counts. Every angle matters. Hit the like button if you want the next update the moment it breaks. Share this video so the truth spreads faster than the cover-ups. And if you're ready for the next chapter, the leaks, the testimonies, the secrets Bravo doesn't want you to see, then subscribe right now. Because the next revelation is coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.